All right, welcome back to the Atlanta Child Murders Revisited. It is 22 October. This is ATKID video number 4, and we're going to pick up here where I left off at Stewart Lakewood. So I recounted yesterday my encounters with Wayne Williams and his little Gemini buddy and how I saw him with a child. At this time in July of 1980, I have no idea that that's Wayne Williams. I have no idea who the kid is that I saw him with. I have no idea. All I know is he scared the hell out of me. And, we have instincts, even as children, that something's not right. Someone is not right. You go by a dog, even as a child, that's in the yard and he's growling and he's barking at you. Um, you get scared, and it's by instinct. And it's actually a good thing because we learn this evolutionary wise growing up in the plains of Africa. The ones that could hear the lion or see the savanna grass brustling got a little extra, you know, half a second to run for the trees because the fear created that situation where you didn't think about it and go, "Oh, is that a lion? Oh, well, maybe I should not get so close to him and maybe go back to the tree." Your intellectual fear shut off, or your intellectual brain shut off, and your primal fear kicked in. At least our ancestors did, and you ran for the tree. And of course, we all know the longer you live, the more likely you're going to produce children. The ones that didn't have that primal fear, the intellectuals that sit there and say, "Oh, nice kitty, kitty," they got eaten. They didn't survive. They didn't pass their genes on. So, all humans, because we're the survivors, our sixth sense, our primal fear, our instinct kicks in. We know to run. You run to live. It's flight or fight. You're not going to fight some fucking lion if you're some little 4-pound hominoid walking around the plains of Africa. So the ones that ran survived. The one that had the instinct to sense something was wrong survived. And millions of years later, I'm sitting in that Dipper Dan's ice cream, and I knew something was wrong with this guy. Something wasn't right. So, like I said, he went out to his white car, white station wagon, got in it with this kid, and they drove off in this direction. And then they went this way. Because I even walked out as he drove away to make sure he was leaving, not coming back or circling around. But as I was walking back inside, I noticed, because I turned this way to kind of turn and look at the whole parking lot to make sure there wasn't anybody else, his Gemini friend out there waiting for me. As I scanned the parking lot, from over in this general direction, a black, unmarked police car, another LTD, comes driving across, following this way, and goes in the same general direction and turns in the same general direction as Wayne Williams' white station wagon. Now, I don't know if they were following him or it's just coincidence, but I knew it was an unmarked police car because you could see the lights in the back, even though the windows are smoky, and they have that little antenna on the back of the trunk near the glass. and they had this window rolled down. And as they drove by, I could see two black police officers in uniform, without their hat on, but in uniform, as they drove by. And one of them looked at me and looked at the store, the different dens, and then they drove off. And they went in the same general direction as Wayne Williams and that kid. Again, I have no idea if that's who they were following or if they were just doing a routine patrol. Now, I went back inside. I locked the door again, scanned outside. I called my dad. I told him what happened. He was very angry. I said, "Look, I can't stay here. Please come get me. Please come get me." I was pleading with him and crying almost. And eventually he agreed. And maybe an hour later, to make me suffer, he shows up and he was hopping mad. How dare you? Uh, what are you, like a little pussy? You're going to cry and call your mommy every time and he would, my dad was semi racist, okay? Every time a little Nigger kid scares you. And I said, "No, Dad, this wasn't a kid. This is an adult. He had a kid with him. And he said he was going to go take care of this kid and come back for me." And you believed him? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course I believed him. I'm 14. This guy's a grown man. And my dad's, "Okay, get in the damn car." We get in the car. The whole time we're driving home, he's just lecturing. "I'm going to buy you some damn dresses for Christmas because that's what you deserve. Why don't you go, you know, play? Why don't you go play with the girls when you get home? Don't be playing with the boys. I'm going to tell, you know, your friends, don't come around because you're playing with the girls now." Okay. And he did everything he could to intimidate me. And I said, "Dad, you know, something's not right. This guy, it's something not right." And he didn't even ask where the owner was. And I said, and the owner just takes off and he's gone. He leaves me there for hours. And there's shootings. The police going by. The police went by right after this guy left. My dad said, "Whatever. Now we got to get you another goddamn job. Now I got to take the keys back to these people. Your mom works with the owner's wife, you know." And I said, "Well, maybe the owner's wife should know that the owner is screwing around with some girl in the shop next door." And then he hit me on my leg and he goes, "Don't you dare talk like that about other adults. You're just fucking 14 years old. You don't know what the hell you're saying. He could be helping her with something with the stock in the store. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about." "No, Dad, every day he'd go over there with that girl and they take off in their car. You don't know what they did. You're fucking 14. You don't know shit." So that's the way it was when I grew up. It wasn't like the 50s, but it wasn't like now. We had our freedoms as kids, but kids could not say anything derogatory about another adult. Parents just wouldn't listen to that shit. You know, we're the adults, you're the kids, we know everything, you don't know fucking shit. But I knew something. Even though I was 14, I knew something was wrong. I felt it. So eventually, I guess he gives the keys to my mom. My mom gives the keys to the store owner and the Hilton there. I get my last paycheck, and that was it. And then, it's end of July, so about 3 weeks later, school starts. And I forgot about it. And I moved on. But within a week, within a couple, maybe a day or two of this incident, it was in the news again that another kid was missing. And I didn't remember the name. I didn't know it was Earl Terrell. It was just another kid that disappeared like they were doing every month, every week, it seemed. So I went on. But I did notice that this kid disappeared. He was last seen right across the highway from where I was working. Now, if I had stayed at that Dipper Dan's, I learned later that the police were looking all over this area. They were looking at Stewart Lakewood interviewing people. They probably would have come by the Dipper Dan's and I would have told them what I saw. But I don't know. I didn't know that that kid they were looking for was the kid that I saw with Wayne Williams. So there were many people who saw Wayne Williams like I did at Stewart Lakewood. Okay. There was a security guard, at least one kind of chubby guy that I remember, black guy. And he would hang out right here, just like a few yards away. Now, he would patrol all of Stewart Lakewood, but when he wasn't patrolling, he was sitting his ass. Sorry if my internet is slow. He was set in this courtyard, okay, right here. So there used to be these little built up, I don't know what you call them, squares. There was like 1, 2, and 3. They would go back, and they had plants and vegetation here, and it was concrete, and it went up to about your waist. And he would sit here and read his book, and he would come over and he'd get an ice cream, and he'd come back and eat his ice cream. And sometimes when I would go to the store or when I was coming into work, I'd see him sitting there. Then I'd see him, about every hour he would make his rounds, walking around looking, but he strategically put himself here because he could see a large portion of the parking lot this way, that way, and this way. Sometimes he would be down on the corner here and he could see that way and this way. Now, I don't know if it's the exact same security guard, but I'm pretty confident it is that I read testimony from a police report. He never testified. There was there was a police report that a security guard that worked at Stewart Lakewood said that he saw Wayne Williams. I'm sorry, let's go down here a little bit. I apologize, my internet is slow. But he said from his position up there, where I would see him all the time, and that's why I think it had to be the same guy, that he would see Wayne Williams frequently come to this building right here and bring kids inside. Inside this building was another recording studio. Now, the FBI figured out there were 5 different recording studios that Wayne would bring the kids to. This was one. There was another at Hotlanta Records. The other one was downtown at 123 Simpson, called the Apogee or Sound Pit Studios. And I'll get into that one a lot more because that's tied personally to my family. And then there was another one at Brookhaven. Excuse me, not Brookhaven. At Shadow Lawn. And it was where the majority of the kids would be seen there, up in Buckhead. Now, the security guard said on one instance he saw Wayne Williams bring a kid into the studio or to this building where the studio was at, and he knew Wayne Williams. He would see Wayne Williams at Stewart Lakewood all the time. He didn't say he went into the Dipper Dan's, but he did say that this was like Wayne Williams' hangout. And he was always with kids or other people. He said that one time he saw Wayne Williams bring a kid into the music studio here, and then he brought him next door to this building right here. Now, this is some kind of technical school now, but back in the summer of 1980, this was a pornography bookstore and video shop. Okay? Now, I have been able to find records on this place. I'll get into this in more detail. but this was owned by a consortium group that had connections to the Gambino family out of New York City. Okay. This company or this management group was associated with another person by the name of Jimmy Ginn. Okay. And I'll get into him later on. But Jimmy Ginn was an associate of a notorious pornographer based out of Atlanta in the 70s by the name of Michael Thevis. Okay. And Michael Thevis went to jail in December of 1974. But he transferred a lot of his money into music studios. He owned a lot of pornography shops. He owned 90% of the porn distribution inside the United States. He was given that franchise by the Gambino family. The Gambinos controlled most of the pornography in the United States through agents like Thevis and his partner DeBernardo, who was a Gambino family member. Um, I'll get into Thevis later, but Thevis ends up going to prison for tax evasion, interstate transportation of pornography, and then that only got him a few years, but the FBI was looking to put a nail in his coffin and put him out of business for good. And they were trying to get him on some other murders, and they were using a former associate of Michael Thevis by the name of Roger Underhill, who is also from New York, another Gambino locksmith, a burglar, who was sent down to Atlanta to keep tabs on Michael Thevis and report back to the Gambinos. When Michael Thevis, I'll get into this much later, but real quick, Michael Thevis found out that Roger Underhill was turning state witness. He broke out of prison in 1978, May of 1978. He was on the lam until about November. In October, he gunned down Roger Underhill, murdered him and another associate up on Riverview Drive in Atlanta, Georgia. And then he was caught later on in Connecticut with one of his girlfriends. Now, I'll just cut to the chase. My mother dated and worked for Michael Thevis back in 1972, 1973, and 1974 at that Sound Pit studio that Wayne Williams would bring kids to. But she worked there in 72, 73, 74. And Wayne Williams would bring him there in 77, 78, 79, 80, 81. And that studio was owned and personally ran by Jimmy Ginn, Michael Thevis's associate. So what happens when Thevis went to prison, he transferred a lot of his company, his money and his companies. He had real estate, restaurants, pornography studios. He had music studios. He started a movie company called Profile Films, Modern Films, back in 72 when my mom was working there. He owned several music studios and many music labels. So he transferred all that to Jimmy Ginn and his girlfriend, another one of his girlfriends. He had many girlfriends besides my mom. He had many other girlfriends. My mom dumped him when she found out he was going to prison. And so she didn't get any of his wealth. But one of his girlfriends, Patricia McLean, got the vast majority. And then the other corporations that he owned, he put one girlfriend in charge of the CEO of each corporation. And through his attorney, Ed Garland, he ran his porn business and music business from the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary all the way up into the mid 80s. And he was in prison. I'll go into this just literally right across the highway over here. Now, let's go back over here. So you can see that security guard would have a pretty damn good view, and he knew Wayne Williams, and he knew what car he drove. And that's what he told the police. They never used him in the trial because he didn't see Nathaniel Cater. He didn't see Jimmy Ray Payne. So that was that. So right here on January 2nd, a kid about 14, 15 years old, maybe 14, 15, about my age, said that he saw Wayne Williams talking to a kid about his age, 14, 15, named Luby Getter. This is January 2nd of 1981. Now, Luby Getter would come down here and try to sell Zep Gel car air fresheners to make money. Okay. I guess he did that on the 2nd and the 3rd because school was out. But I don't know. I always thought school started around the 3rd, at least for us. But he was seen by this guy, and he knew Wayne Williams because of something that had happened previously, and I'll get into that. But he saw Wayne Williams lead the kid, and they got into a green station wagon, and they drove off. Now, the reason he knew Wayne Williams is because the previous summer in August, just 2 or 3 weeks after my incident with Wayne Williams, he ran into Wayne Williams here, and he didn't have a job yet, but Wayne Williams asked him, "Hey, you want a job?" And he goes, "Yeah, okay, we'll get in the car, we'll go, and I'll take you to the job." Instead of taking him to the job, he took him across the highway over near Lakewood Fairgrounds to a street, Petty Grove. I'll show you. And he gave him some alcohol, gave him some drugs, and tried to molest him. The kid was really nervous in the car. He got out of the car, went to the back of the trunk. I mean, Wayne Williams did. And when he did that, the kid broke and ran for an apartment and got away. And he positively identified Wayne Williams to the police. Okay. That was on the 2nd. And that was back in August. He saw Luby Getter because he was working down this way on the 2nd. Now, what's really interesting is that when he describes the car that Wayne Williams picked him up in August, it was exactly the same description of the car that I saw Wayne Williams with the Gemini kid when they pulled up here and were both looking through the foggy windows at me in the store. It was a cream-colored, like Ford LTD, 2-door with a black vinyl or leather top and a trunk. It wasn't a station wagon. That's what I remember. That's what I saw. And there were years that I questioned myself. Did I really see Wayne Williams? Did I really see what all this happened? And when I read that, that confirmed again to me that what I saw was real. Because when you think about things in your mind, okay, was he in the white station wagon both times, or was it the cream-colored car, or maybe he's in the cream-colored? You kind of you start to question your memory. But then I just sat back and relaxed and thought about it, and yeah, it was the cream-colored car with the Gemini kid, and it was the white station wagon with Earl Terrell. And that's how I remember it. So that confirmed to me that what I saw was right on the money, because I'm reading this 40 years later, and he's talking about the same colored car that I saw. Same type, too. It wasn't a cream-colored station wagon. It was a cream-colored 2-door LTD with a black leather vinyl top, half leather vinyl top. Same exact description. So what happens with this witness is he eventually gets a job at Stewart Lakewood, and then he sees Luby Getter and Wayne Williams because he recognized Wayne Williams, and he saw the kid, and he was thinking about what happened to him. That was thinking that was probably going to happen again to that kid. The same thing. That's why he remembered Wayne Williams. And the very next day, yeah, that was the second. This is the third. Luby Getter is brought here by his brother, older brother, drops him off, and then his older brother comes back and he's gone. Now, Luby, they dropped him off right here, just yards away from where I had been working 6 months before. But Luby Getter was seen by a woman down here who came all the way from Rockdale County, a black woman, to get a mattress. And as the mattress was being loaded, she saw Wayne Williams. She described Wayne Williams, okay, with this kid, Luby Getter, and it was close enough that she could hear them, okay. And again, Wayne Williams had on the flared collared shirt. It was black and white, different colors. He had a scar in his face. It looked like a scar. It was from his acne, or he could have been scratched by one of the kids. Okay. And so she saw him talking to Luby Getter, and Luby Getter said out loud, "I'd like to go with you, but I need to make money from this." And he said, "Don't worry about it. I can give you some money." So they get in the car, and it again was a green station wagon, just like the previous witness had seen the day before. Now, 2 hours later, Wayne Williams is seen with his green station wagon up in Buckhead at the Shadow Lawn studio. Nobody saw Luby Getter. So what did he do with Luby Getter? So the next day, and here we'll get out of Stewart Lakewood. But I'm going to tell you this next story about Luby Getter in just a second. So there were people that said that the Sanders brothers, these guys down in Mountain View, these racist KKK guys that were preparing for a race war, were caught on a hot mic with an informant saying that he was going to choke that Luby Getter because Luby Getter bashed his go-kart into his car, and he's going to choke him with his dick. Okay, that's what he said on the hot mic. Of course, it's almost impossible because, like I told you, with the demographics, that out of 100 people, maybe one or two, maybe five at the most, would be white. The security guard is usually standing right there. Okay, so if Luby Getter is anywhere around here, and a van full of white guys jump out and grab Luby Getter, well, everybody knows the Atlanta child murders is going on, so Luby Getter is going to run like hell, screaming, "Help, help, help! The KKK, they're coming to get me, these white guys. They're trying to kidnap me." Security guard's going to see them, everybody walking around, crossing here. You know, people would cross from this road over behind me to the right, cross up to this corner, and then go up Stewart Lakewood. So there were constantly people walking, cutting across this parking lot. They would have seen everything. So it's virtually impossible that the Sanders brothers could have kidnapped Luby Getter. And we'll get into them later, but I'll just tell you real quick. They did a surveillance on them, the GBI, for 2 months or 3 months. While people were being disappeared and killed, the GBI had eyes on them, recording their phone conversations, and they never saw them go out and kill kids or try to pick up kids or nothing. You can't, if you're under surveillance and you're being tapped and you're being followed and photographed, you can't kill people. Well, you can, but you can't kill people without being seen. And not only while they were being surveilled, the murders continued, they actually increased to every week in March. So you can write the Sanders brothers off. I'm Jewish. I would love nothing better to throw a bunch of fucking racist KKK members in jail. But, you know, even the worst racist son of a bitch in the world deserves a fair trial and due process. But anyway, so that is with that. Also, in Stewart Lakewood, were several calls. When victims would disappear, they would trace the phones back to payphones here in Stewart Lakewood. There were all kinds of payphones around here. I even used one time. There was like one over here somewhere. But at least 3 or 4 phone calls were traced back to Stewart Lakewood Shopping Center right here, right after the victims disappeared. I believe the one with Earl Terrell was even traced to here. Homer Williams was seen traveling around driving his burgundy car at Stewart Lakewood with the kid inside his car. Okay. Of course, the security guard saw Wayne here all the time. So this was Wayne's hub right here. This is his territory. Okay. When Wayne tells me, I'm like, what? He's like, well, what are you doing here? Aren't you a little bit out of your area? And I'm like, oh, no, it's a free country. This is America. I can work anywhere I want. And then Wayne tells me, you're not in America anymore. You're in my territory. This is where I'm at. You're way out of your range. He was right, because he had marked this as his territory, and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. All right. So this is Stewart Lakewood. Okay. If you back off Atlanta here, all right, there's downtown Atlanta. Right here is where Wayne lives at Penelope. This is I-20. This is 285. You got Stewart Lakewood Freeway right here. Lakewood Fairgrounds is right there. This is Memorial. Now, this down to the airport is Wayne's kill box. This right here is his hunting ground. This is where he's targeting his victims. And dead center, right in the middle, like a bullseye, the spoke of a wheel, the center hub of a wheel is Stewart Lakewood, right in the center. Okay? So victims disappeared here. Victims disappeared here. Victims were found there and disappeared. 2 of them were found there or disappeared there. Many of the victims disappeared along Memorial right here. Some of them disappeared right here. Okay? Many were found in the rivers. South River here. And then at first, many were found just outside 285, Niski Lake Road, and in the woods over here. Eventually, he pushes it to the river, and they're found in the river. So this is Wayne's hunting territory. Now, in my last videos, I used this example of this movie that came out in the 90s. They had Michael Douglas and Val Kilmer. And it was called the Lion in the Darkness, or Heart of Darkness, or something like that. Basically, it was about a British train company that was building a railroad across the heart of Africa. They had imported all these Indian workers to work on the railroad, and as they made their way, they had a camp, and they moved the camp with the railroad. Okay? Now, eventually, they get to an area where every night they're being attacked. The Indian camp is being attacked, and people are being dragged off into the jungle and killed. What they didn't know is that their railroad track had entered into the hunting ground territory of not just 1, but 2 lions. Okay? The lion did its thing. It went out every day and got the easiest prey. And now you had thousands of Indian workers sitting out in the open in tents as easy prey, sleeping. And so they had to hire these two special hunters to track down these lions and kill them. They even set up traps, which didn't work. So this is what we find ourselves with the Atlanta child murders: is that you've got this hunter, a serial killer, out there hunting children, and this is his kill box right here. And in the center of this kill box was me at Stewart Lakewood. I had no idea. I was like a deer in the headlights. I had no idea what was going on. Okay? So, just to give you some geography, Earl Terrell, the boy I saw, I'm going to go over all this in much more detail, but Earl Terrell, the boy I saw, was at a park here. So let me put the satellite view. He was swimming in the afternoon, the end of July, at this pool right here. Okay? He got kicked out for horseplay. He was last seen sitting on a bench here. Now he lived right over here, approximately about right here. Okay? But he was also seen at a store right here off of Jonesboro. Actually, I think it's like, actually, I think the store is right there. Yeah. So he was seen at a store right here. And is it right there? Yeah. Right there. He was seen at a store, or coming out of a store right there. Apparently, Wayne Williams must have driven down Jonesboro Road, saw him. He already knew Earl Terrell, and he offered him a ride. And then eventually they end up at my place. Now, again, Earl Terrell got kicked out about 3:30. I go into work about 4, and it was very soon after that, literally right after the owner left, about 4:15, 4:20, maybe 4:25, that Wayne Williams shows up with Earl Terrell in my Dipper Dance. Just only took him 5 minutes to drive from here. Now, right across from this is a cemetery right here called Southview Cemetery. Okay? And this is Southview Cemetery right here. The father of Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther King Sr., is buried in this cemetery. I think even Hank Aaron's father, or Hank Aaron, is buried in this cemetery. This was a cemetery started by African Americans that were refused entry for their bodies because they couldn't afford it, into higher price white cemeteries. So this was started, I think, approximately 100 years ago or more, for poor, indigent African Americans to be buried. Now, right along this road right here, okay, that is where on January 4th, the lady, I believe it's this road here, because when you look at the news footage, it looks like it's right in this area. So there's news footage I'll show you later. The lady is telling the story, and she tells the story that they're driving down the road, and then driving towards them is a green station wagon driving erratically around the road, back and forth across the road. It almost hits them. Driving the station wagon was a thin, tall black male whose head almost hit the top of the roof. In the passenger seat was a chubby black male wearing glasses and holding on to a red wig, and in his lap was a child he was struggling with, and he was struggling with his glasses, he was struggling with this red wig, and he was struggling with the child. And she thought it was highly unusual. She thought the child was fighting to get away, and they drove off and took off. And this is the day after Earl Terrell disappears from that shopping center. Now, was it Earl Terrell? I don't know. I have the theory because by this time in January of 1981, there's several. It'll end up being about 8 of the victims will end up being buried here. But several at this time, several of the victims are already buried here. So I think that, you remember I talked that one of the theories could be that Wayne Williams killed them, at least starting off, to silence them, to keep them quiet about this child pornography business that he was involved with and using some of the children. And so he would bring some of the children out and set them in front of a gravestone. Now, this is all supposition, okay? This is what I think. And stand them in front of that gravestone and say, look, there's Yusuf Bell. You look, there's Earl Terrell, whoever. You're going to keep talking, you're going to end up 6 feet under the ground, just like them. And use it as a point of intimidation. And this woman just happened to run across that. Now, Earl Terrell lived approximately in this area. I'll get the exact address later. A couple of streets over was a notorious another pornographer who was arrested in March. A white guy who was caught with pictures of white kids, okay, and he was tried and convicted on the same day. The jury did a conviction for him, guilty conviction, on the same day, just a few hours after Wayne Williams was stopped after they heard the splash on the bridge on the 22nd of May. Exactly just a few hours later. Okay? Along this road, I believe along this road also where Earl Terrell lived, Luby Getter has his encounter with the Sanders brothers. Okay? Because Luby Getter was visiting Earl Terrell. They knew each other and was driving, according to the Sanders brothers. The Sanders brothers knew a neighbor of Earl Terrell's, and boom, that's where Luby Getter supposedly ran into one of, the car of the Sanders brothers. Now, there was another kid who lived right here, and he disappears, and I'll go into that one. The pornographers lived, I think, like right over in here, and another one lived approximately right here. There was a hotel right here where a neighbor of Nathaniel Cater, Elizabeth Montgomery, and Latanya Wilson, she lived in the same neighborhood housing project as those two victims, was found stabbed to death in a hotel at the Alamo Hotel right here. There was another pornography shop approximately right here, and another one right there, all owned by the same syndicate group that Michael Thieves was involved with. Now, Michael Thieves also, before he went to prison, he gave Jimmy Ginn a lot of money to launder. And the best way to launder money is real estate. Okay? You can take your money, buy up a bunch of houses and rentals and resell them. And for some reason, he ended up buying a bunch of houses right here off Hilltop and Pryor. That house right there he owned. I believe that house right there. Now, it was all under the name of Jimmy Ginn, but Jimmy Ginn was just a manager. He was loyal to Michael Thieves. He saw what happened to Roger Underhill just a few years before. But the thing about these properties is all these properties were bought right before Michael Thieves goes to prison. So in 72, 73, 74, these properties were purchased. Now, yeah, that one right there, this one, and this one. I go over the exact addresses. Now, eventually, Jimmy Ginn dies about 2018 or so. He had a son named Jimmy Ginn Jr., who took over all his corporations after he died and used the same addresses that for these houses they had bought and changed the title and everything over into his name. So he was using these addresses, even though he lived in Roswell or now Alpharetta, he was still using these addresses to re-register his dad's businesses like the Sound Pit Studios, like Hotlanta Records, and some other ones that he opened up. One called ATG, which is a music promotion company. And you'll see Jimmy Ginn Jr. took over Ginn Music, which had taken over all of Michael Thieves' record labels under General Recording Corporation, GRC. Okay. Now, I just found all this by accident. Okay. I had no idea what I was going to run into. They also own more properties up in this area here. There's 2 or 3 houses. I think there's 2 more up in here. Now, why they kept these houses for 50 something years, I don't know. Why is Jimmy Ginn Jr. still owning these houses? I don't know. I do know that right here at Ashwood and Pickfair, there's Pickfair Way. Excuse me. Hold on one second. Yeah, right there. This is literally 100 yards away from one of Jimmy Ginn's houses. Okay. Yeah, right here. Pickfair Way. Hold on one second. It's hard to pin these down. Yeah, right there. So where that tree is right there, you just saw. Well, somewhere in these trees, I believe it was this tree right here. They found the body of, was it Faye Yerby, who was like a 19-year-old black female that was killed in like 1981. They didn't find any fibers that linked her to the other victims, so they didn't put her on the list. But she was stabbed, raped, strangled, and tied to the tree, just like Angel and Near. But what? A year later. Approximately at this intersection right here, this is where that witness that I told you that saw Wayne Williams offered him a job, and he went off with Wayne Williams and parked like probably right by this tree in the cream colored 2 doors car with the black top. This is where he said he was, approximately right here, and he ran off to apartments in this direction and escaped. So, and again, look at where we're at, okay? We're at Stewart Lakewood. Again, I used to take the cars to the auto auction right here that I talked about. We're literally right across the street. Right down here is where all those houses, okay, belonging to Michael Thevis and Jimmy Ginn are right here. Another victim disappeared right here. Can't remember the name real quick, but over here is where Mickey McIntosh was working, and he was seen going to work, being dropped off by a man in a white station wagon that the owner identified as Wayne Williams right there at Mickey McIntosh. Now, right here, literally right across the street, is the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, which pornographer Michael Thevis was incarcerated there from 1979 to, I think, 82, 83. And in 1981, at the time they're trying to solve the Atlanta child murders about March, the IRS and the FDIC take Michael Thevis to court and tell a judge that they want to move him because he's still running his pornography and studio business from prison. And again, you have to ask, how does he do that? Well, he's got Jimmy Ginn running most of the pornography business and the music business. He's got Patricia McLean running some of the music business and some of the restaurants and real estate. And he has a lawyer that I'm going to go over later on, but his name is Ed Garland. And Ed Garland comes every week to get his instructions from Michael Thevis in prison right there at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. And by the way, when was it Hosea Williams went to visit Wayne Williams after all this breaks, they asked him, Wayne Williams, did you do this? And he goes, I haven't killed anybody. And he goes, because we want to believe you and get you the best defense ever. And the first person that Hosea Williams suggests is Ed Garland. Okay. Now, Wayne Williams' lawyer was, remember, Mary Welcome. And he said he picked her because she was a friend of the family. She was a friend of Homer's. They already knew Mary Welcome. But Mary Welcome, I'll go into much more detail later on, was an associate of Ed Garland. Okay. Mary Welcome, when she graduated from law school, when she was going to law school, interned at Ed Garland's office. And I'll go into this later. Ed Garland's office is literally 100 yards, one street over on Maple Street, from where Wayne Williams was taking the kids to the studio on Shadow Lawn in Buckhead. And Mary Welcome, okay, eventually, 1974? Yeah, right before Thevis goes to prison, Thevis gave a large political donation to Mayor Andrew Maynard Jackson. Okay, and then right after that political donation, he gets elected, and he appoints Mary Welcome, fresh out of working at Ed Garland's office and fresh with a new lawyer's license and zero experience, as the Atlanta solicitor. And guess what the Atlanta solicitor's job was? To go after the porn industry, to use the code to shut down the porn industry in all of Atlanta. But what did she do? She only went after the competition of, guess who? Michael Thevis and the Gambino families. Any pornography business, adult bookstore, porn theater, strip club that wasn't owned or associated with Michael Thevis or the Gambino families, Mary Welcome made sure that she got that shut down. Now, I've got a video that shows this business right here. There was a porn shop right here, a porn shop right here, and that porn shop right across from the Dipper Dans were all sanctioned and all shut down by Mary Welcomes. This one reopened. This was the only one that reopened. Okay. And actually, no, I'm sorry. They all opened under supposedly different owners. Same owners, Michael Davis and the Gambinos, who just had a different name. He paid somebody to go in, usually another lawyer, to do that. Now, Mary Welcome and Garland were working together. Okay. As soon as Michael Davis kills Roger Underhill, Maynard Jackson fires Mary Welcome. And guess where she goes? She goes back to work for Ed Garland. Okay. And then she ends up teaching law after only practicing law for 4 years at a law college downtown. And then next we find her, guess what? As Wayne Williams' attorney. So, and I'm going to go through all the Wayne Williams connections with Michael Davis, but every single attorney that Wayne Williams had, from Mary Welcome to Ed Garland to Axum to Fryer to Binder to, the one in Rome, Georgia, and Lynn Watley, were all had connections either working for or working with um, Ed Garland, and thus Michael Davis. And I'll make one last point before I go. Ed Garland was a high-priced mob and drug dealer attorney. He only took high, rich clients that were drug dealers and pornographers. He helped fight the pornography laws and obscenity laws all the way to the Supreme Court and got them overturned. This is why you can watch porn on your internet, because while Thieves was in jail, he was using Ed Garland and his billions of dollars to overturn all of the pornography laws. And he did that all from prison right there. Another side note is that Aaron White was seen right outside the gate of the federal prison, right across the street, getting into a blue car with a man who fit the description of Wayne Williams and Nathaniel Cater by someone who knew Aaron White, right across from the prison, right there. Small world. So I'm going to get into more of this and show you the associations between Michael Thieves and Wayne Williams. Now, was Michael Thieves directing Wayne Williams to kill these children? I don't know. Who knows? My hypothesis that I lean towards the greatest, but still we have very little information, is that Wayne Williams was recruiting children and using the music business as his scam to get children into the pornography business, the child pornography business, okay? And he would bring the children to Jimmy Gin at, and I'm going to go into this in greater detail later, at this Profile Films, which was located right here at 881 Memorial, right next to Cabbagetown. And in the basement, upstairs on the fourth floor, they had a studio. And the police raided that in the mid-'80s and found pornography and found child pornography in the back. And we'll get into this in much greater detail. And this is the key to the Atlanta child murders that was never, ever, ever mentioned. And there's a reason, because Maynard Jackson wasn't buddy-buddy with Thieves, but he had been getting money from Thieves, so they steered all that away from the Thieves thing, connections. All right, take care.